Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Protect, Connect, Maintain, Sustain, How BMPs Improve Your Game. My name is Emily Fuger. I'm the Manager of Environmental Programs here at GCSAA, and I will serve as today's moderator. But before I turn things over to our presenter, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We are recording today's event, and you will receive access to the recording via a follow-up email. We do have handouts today that you can download from your GoToWebinar control panel. If your control panel has minimized, you will see a narrow strip with an orange rectangle at the top. Click that and the panel will open, and then you can access the handouts as well as the Q&A box where you can type your questions as we go along. Your audio is muted in the system, but if you want to ask a question, just use the raise a hand button at the bottom of that narrow strip and I'll unmute you at an appropriate time and you can ask your question directly. Ken Benoit, CGCS, has worked in many roles during his nearly 3 decades in the golf industry. He served as president of MET GCSAA in 2018 and 19. And in addition to being the founder and president of EcoTurf Consulting, a firm dedicated to protecting the environment through the game of golf, Ken is executive director of New York Golf Course Foundation. In his role with the NYGCF, he helps guide the nonprofit organization through educational outreach programs and relationship development designed to preserve and protect water resources in the state of New York. Throughout his career, Benoit has been dedicated to building relationships between state legislators, golf industry professionals, and the general public to further educate all on environmental protection related matters. So please join me in welcoming Ken, and I will now turn it over to him.
Well, thank you, Emily, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining on this webinar. I'm particularly excited about spending the next hour with you. And over the course of this hour, what I ultimately hope to do is to help you create a BMP mindset and an understanding of how BMPs fit into your management program and how critical they are really for our industry to move forward as we look at it from a sustainable perspective. So before we go too deep, what I'd like to do is just take a second and talk about what is a best management practice. The term has been around since the early 20th century. You know, there was the folks who were designing sewage treatment plants coined that phrase, and so it has been around for quite a while. It first showed up in the government in the Clean Water Act in the 1970s. They referenced best management practices. So it's been around for a while. It's essentially a method or technique found to be most effective and practical means of achieving an objective such as preventing water pollution or reducing pesticide usage. What does that mean for us in the golf industry? It's essentially a set of science-based or research-based guidelines that we can use to create optimal turf conditions while at the same time protect and preserve our water resources. So that's really how we would define it in golf. So the first of those 4 pillars, protect, connect, maintain, sustain, is protect. Right? And so we're going to see how BMPs, using these BMPs, help you to meet expectations and responsibilities. So your job 1 is protecting your job. That's the same for everybody. Completely understandable. No matter what you do, you want to protect your job. And we can utilize these BMPs to help you with your job. They can help you communicate up the chain. For instance, I was at a golf course, a single owner golf course for 18 years. And I can tell you that every time I came up with a way to save money, I got a gold star. I got a feather in my cap. And so I use these BMPs to implement cost savings in chemical expenses, fertilizer expenses, reduce labor expenses, and it really worked well for me. We can also utilize these BMPs for support in the decision-making process, such as if you're have trees that are impeding your ability to grow healthy turf grass. That's addressed in the BMPs. You can utilize that science-based information to help you convince the decision makers to remove a tree, or an irrigation upgrade. That's addressed in your BMPs. Something as simple as rolling fairways is also addressed in your BMPs. The purchase of new equipment. BMPs even talk about new equipment and maintaining equipment and the importance of that as it relates to growing healthy turf grass and what that means ultimately for the environment. Now, on top of your responsibilities to your job, you have social responsibilities. We all do. We all have social responsibilities. And, you know, I think without going too off track here, we recognized a few weeks ago the level to which our social responsibilities impact other people. And we as environmental stewards, we're caring for land. We can impact water quality and the environment on a really high level, both positively and negatively. And so we have to recognize the responsibility that we have with regard to that. And people are watching, right? So water use and quality is under a microscope at home, in your communities, as well as worldwide. And eyes are on golf. And so we have to figure out, how do we fit in? And BMPs and implementing BMPs within the golf industry is going to be critical to our fitting in to what society is going to look like moving forward. We can see there's information out there and studies being conducted that predict water use per population. There's water use by country. So just look at this map here. You can see that the United States is right in the thick of it. The prediction that we're going to be using 40 to 80% of our supply. I mean, imagine that, 40 to 80% of our supply we're going to be using by 2040. That's not sustainable. We have to figure out a way to reduce our usage. And the more we pollute the water, the less supply we have. So they really fit hand in hand. And then if you look at the map of the US as it relates to gallons per day usage per person with population, percent population change overlaid, we can see that out west the numbers can be, pretty startling, certainly eye-opening. If you look at Nevada, for instance, they're going to increase their population, estimated, by 114% in the next 10 years. And we can see that their water use out there is 150 to 200 gallons per person per day. We know that water supply out west is low. So if you think about the supply, the use, and the population increase, the numbers can be pretty scary. Out east we have a lot of supply. We also have a lot of population, but we have a lot of supply of fresh water out east. So we tend to it can be easy to lose sight of the relationship between supply and demand as it relates to water. But I can tell you that as the West struggles with their supply, they're going to be leaning on the East. And I don't think it's beyond scope to think that we would ultimately pipe fresh water from the East to the West here in the United States. And when we get to that point, it's going to be scary. So we have responsibilities to monitor our use and reduce our use of water as much as possible. If we look at the coastal hypoxia and eutrophication map, here we can see that the United States, that particularly the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, have high levels of coastal hypoxia. Now, coastal hypoxia is a naturally occurring phenomena, but there are human inputs that contribute to that. And if you think that just because there's no red there in the middle of the country where you're living, it's not really a concern for you, just remember that your water ends up somewhere. Down south or out west, and that water, as it moves through the country and ultimately deposits into the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean, is affected all along the way. And so you do have a responsibility for protecting and preserving that water resource. And if you don't think people are looking at us, and I'm sure you understand that people are looking at us, but this is just one example where golf courses are called right out here. If you look where I've circled under fertilizer, under where nutrients come from, they say agriculture, golf courses, and suburban lawns. They've got us right there at the top, and we're low-hanging fruit. By non-golfers, we're viewed as a game for the rich, and so we're pretty low-hanging fruit. But if you look down below, I've underlined sewage treatment plants. We know that sewage treatment plants contribute much more to water pollution than golf courses do. But there they are down low, and we're up high in the list. So people are looking, and we need to change the perspective of non-golfers to go from thinking about what we're doing to the environment to understanding what we do for the environment. So sources of contaminants, we have surface runoff is a source of contaminant. You can see that irrigation, excess irrigation, big rain events, these things, when they happen over saturated or compacted soils, clay soils, these types of scenarios where runoff would be common, they pick up the nutrients and the contaminants and carry them right to the water bodies of water as they cross the ground. Leaching nutrients can be picked up in the groundwater and pulled right through the soil profile. We know that turf grass and turf rooting systems in particular are great filters, but they don't pick it all up. If we're using excessive amounts of chemicals and nutrients, they will find their way and work their way through the soil. We know that through the study and the use of lysimeters. We know that this stuff does work its way through the soil. Drift. Now the EPA defines drift as the physical movement of pesticide droplets or particles through the air at the time of pesticide application or soon thereafter from the target site to any non or off-target site. So you just have to be mindful of when to spray. And I know that, as superintendents, we get tugged at both sides. We've got the environmental piece that we know is important, but we also have to get out in front of those golfers. So we're spraying, okay, it's a little bit windy today, but tomorrow I've got a member guest, I've got to get this spray in. We have to make the decisions, and we have to use criteria in making those decisions. Okay, maybe we can delay our spray till the evening. We see the wind is going to die down. Sorry, Assistant Bill, we're going to have to come back this evening and spray. We just can't get the spray down this morning because it's too windy. I'll make it up to you later. When you're spraying, at sunrise and we have the inversion going, if there's no wind present, that's one of the worst times you can spray. That spray drift, those micro particles can get lifted up into the air columns and travel for miles. So suspending your spray for a short amount of time until the inversion is over with makes great sense. So you just have to be mindful of those things. Sedimentation is another source of contamination. You know, if you're doing a renovation project and you've got open ground, you should be using silt fence. Silt fence is not difficult to install, and it really makes a huge difference when it comes to loading water bodies with sediment, particularly if you've got a large area exposed. Point source. Right, so hopefully this definition of point source doesn't define your chemical building, but in New York, its point source is defined as any discernible, confined, and discrete conveyance from which pollutants are or may be discharged. You know, look at your maintenance facility. We know that the maintenance facility is the #1 potential source of pollution on the golf course. And so it's critical that you get your house in order. Have a good chemical building that can absorb spills. Have a plan in place to handle any sort of spill that might take place. These are incredibly important things to have in place before the spill happens. Well, and then what's the potential impact, right? So drinking water impairment, enrichment of surface water. So you look at this photo right here, and we know that there are problems there. Now, that doesn't mean that if your pond looks like that you're necessarily the sole cause of that effect, but hopefully you're looking at your programs and you're not contributing to that problem, and that you've got a plan in place to help prevent this situation from happening. So you need to develop a BMP mindset. That's critical to understanding this process. So having the ability to identify risks and then at the same time understand your responsibilities as they relate to the water resources. So understanding risks and drawing a direct line to your responsibilities is #1. If you don't have that, you cannot have a BMP mindset. You have to recognize the existing point and non-point source challenges that are faced in general. And then you have to identify those things, implement a plan to mitigate the risk to the water quality, and then assess the effectiveness of that plan. So that's a BMP mindset. You identify the risks, recognize your responsibilities, you look and find the challenges, you implement a plan to mitigate those challenges, and then assess how the plan worked. That's a BMP mindset. And adapting BMPs to your facility, the process is not a difficult process, really. And in fact, most of you guys have hundreds of BMPs implemented at your property, whether you even realize it or not. But you need to assess your facility. That's #1. You don't know what you got till you know what you got. Consider a number of approaches that can help you meet your BMP objective. So let's, for instance, say you've got a fairway next to a body of water. So there are going to be a number of approaches that you can use to help mitigate any sort of nutrient runoff, right? So it could be, reducing your irrigation, nightly irrigation for the first week after putting down a granular fertilizer, right? So it could be something that simple. It could also then include covering your drain inlets for drain lines that lead directly into that body of water. When you put down your fertilizer or you're spraying your fairways with either a liquid fertilizer or putting a pesticide down, cover your drain inlets. If you're spraying right over your drain inlet or applying granular fertilizers right over your drainage inlets, whatever goes in that inlet goes directly into your water source, and it does not take much effort to cover those inlets. It sounds like a lot of work, but I know guys, personally know guys who implement that program, and they say, listen, it's really not much work. It's just a matter of adopting it, accepting your responsibility, and then following through with it. So you also have to consider all your available resources, right? So if changing your drainage system so that it runs through a filtered system isn't practical for you because you couldn't afford to do that, well, covering the drain inlets is a pretty inexpensive way of mitigating that problem. You can implement that. So not everybody can do everything, but you can do something. Guaranteed, you can do something to improve your the BMP program at your facility. And then maybe as important as anything is to use a incremental process for building your BMP program. You're not going to build it overnight. You're not going to make a list and have everything checked off in short order. There's just no way you're going to do that. You've got to identify the things that are most risky, try to address the things that you can address, and just start to develop that BMP mindset. Have that in the front of your brain when you're managing your golf course. So how do you assess your facility, right? You conducting a site analysis. You want to evaluate your watershed. Everybody's in a watershed. Everybody is in a watershed. Find out the information related to your watershed. Maybe there are problems or concerns with regard to that watershed. And if you're managing a tract of land in a watershed that has concerns, you should sure know what those concerns are and make sure that you're not contributing negatively to the problems that exist in that watershed. So that's a very important aspect of this. And then you need to identify the areas on your own golf course which are prone to leaching or to runoff, right? Steep slopes and so forth. And then identifying any critical habitat and endangered species that are present. I think that's something that probably most guys are aware of, and they recognize the importance of that. And then preserving and corridors for wildlife movement. And when we talk about corridors for wildlife movement, it's not just the land movers, right? It's the birds and it's the pollinators and connecting pollinator habitat. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about a project by Pollinator Pathways, whereby they're connecting large swaths of land through the promotion of pollinator habitat around states here in the East. So Blake Halderman's golf course superintendent here in New York at Brayburn Country Club, and he's currently the president of the New York Golf Course Foundation. And the New York Golf Course Foundation essentially curates the BMPs. We also, and of which I'm the executive director, we also create educational opportunities. We support research in the state of New York, and it's all centered around BMPs. And Blake says that in New York, we recognize the importance that BMPs have had in helping superintendents communicate with stakeholders and non-stakeholders at the course, in the community, and throughout the state. Through the implementation of BMPs, we've changed perceptions in New York and have realized advantages afforded to our industry as a direct result. He says, I believe the most lasting legacy we can contribute to the game of golf is to implement facility BMPs nationwide. So legacy, right? Legacy. We have an opportunity to create a legacy as an industry. How often does an industry get the opportunity to create a legacy? We're in an era right now whereby we can contribute to the betterment of society, right? Through the game of golf. And guys, 50 years from now can look back on this era and we'll be recognized as as guys who have done an important service for society. And I think that's important. Now, so we've looked at protect. Now we're going to look at connect, right? So how BMPs help you connect and build these important relationships around the state, in your communities. And we'll start with my buddy, Dr. Frank Rossi. So I called Frank up in 2012. Well, let me rewind just a minute. There was a group of us superintendents who saw what was going on around the country. We looked at Florida, we saw what Oregon had done, Georgia, and as well as Virginia, in putting together BMPs. And we said, you know, all the pressure that we're facing here in New York, we had recently had some legislation that affected our ability to put out nutrients, which we didn't feel was science-based, and we thought, boy, what a great opportunity for us. We could build a set of BMPs here, and that would help us in our ability to communicate and create these relationships. And one of the things that we didn't even really think about was how that was going to improve our relationship with the universities, right? And the professors that are doing all this work for us. So I called up Frank and I said, hey, Frank, here's what we're thinking of doing. Do you have any interest in helping us out with this? And he said, Ken, I've been waiting for this phone call my entire career. He said, I'm so excited about doing this. You know, when do we start? So we got together, we met with Frank, we started building this process, and I can tell you that we turned what was already a very good relationship into something so deep and meaningful between he and the superintendents here in New York that I don't think any of us guessed that it would have led to that. And I can tell you that it's just been nothing short of fantastic. And Frank says the development of best management practices led and funded by the golf industry enabled a collaborative academic effort in New York to codify science-based environmental stewardship practices. In our state specifically, the focus on preserving and protecting water quality is thoroughly aligned with our turfgrass science program and Cornell University's land grant mission. It seems to me that our experience in New York and that of many of my colleagues across the country demonstrates the important role an engaged land grant university can play. So these university relationships and superintendent relationships around the country have come together through the implementation of these BMPs. He says that the collaboration among academic and industry professionals was a win-win for engaging with government agencies as it demonstrated the industry's commitment to science-based management. So key in that sentence is engaging with government agencies. So here in New York, the relationship that we had with the New York Department of Environmental Conservation was, well, I would say that it was a pretty scripted relationship. We would be working on the golf course. All of a sudden we'd hear on the radio, hey, somebody's here to see you from DEC. Our heart would sink to our belt. We would drive into the shop. We would meet with DEC. They would do their inspection, generally write you up for something, even minor, and that would be it. That was our relationship. That was our entire relationship. They would tell us when chemicals were banned or no longer able to be used, and that was it. We did not really have any sort of foundation in our relationship. It was purely scripted. And in 2012, we decided an important part of our BMP initiative would be to include regulators in the review process. We asked them for help, essentially, in creating this document. And that showed two things. It showed our commitment to the environment, our commitment to our job, but it also showed commitment to getting this thing right and not just creating a BMP, but implementing a BMP that aligned with not just superintendent's perspective, but with the regulator's perspective. So Scott says, by the way, Director, Bureau of Pesticide Management. So not a insignificant person as it relates to pesticide use in the state of New York, I can tell you. In 2012, the New York Department of Environmental Conservation was asked by a group of New York superintendents to participate in the development of a New York State golf BMPs. We were immediately impressed that the golf industry took it upon themselves to develop these science-based voluntary guidelines. The BMP initiative has provided an opportunity for the DEC and golf course superintendents to grow our relationship into a meaningful partnership, Wow. We look forward to working together with superintendents in promoting the adoption of facility BMPs, which we feel is a critical phase in the success of the initiative. So they're still connected to us. Because through continued communication, they understand that this is a process, and the next step in this process is facility adoption of these BMPs, and they want to be a part of it. And I've had conversations recently with Scott related to creating a program where superintendents in New York can get DEC credit for adopting certain aspects of our BMPs. I mean, we couldn't have even dreamt that we would have that kind of relationship where we could help drive programs with them to earn DEC credits. It's just been amazing. And one of the moments that we really knew that we had a great relationship with DEC was when the chemical chlorpyrifos was banned for use on Long Island. Now, if you control, if you're charged with controlling ABW adults, you know there are not a lot of chemicals out there for use in controlling ABW. And on Long Island, the only chemical that could be used for use of controlling ABW was chlorpyrifos. That was the only registered chemical on Long Island labeled for controlling ABW. Well, superintendents there, when they heard that news, were really panicking. And so they got together with DEC and sat around a table, and DEC actually asked them, what chemical can we register for you guys that could take the place of chlorpyrifos so that you would then have the ability to control these adults? And they actually sat around a table, talked about that, came up with a plan, and implemented that plan. And Joe Gardner, superintendent on Long Island there, he's at Fresh Meadow Country Club. He says the golf BMPs in New York have facilitated a deeper, more trusting relationship between golf course superintendents and regulators and lawmakers. For example, after facing the inevitable loss of another very important chemical on Long Island, superintendents from Long Island sat down with state regulators to discuss our concerns. They simply asked us what they could do to help mitigate our concerns. It was the enhanced relationship cultivated through the New York State golf BMPs which led to the conversation and ultimately resolution of what could have been a potentially devastating situation. So what a great example of a success story that we've had by simply implementing these BMPs. And I can also share another story that relates to lawmakers. For many years, the state of New York received what was called a turfgrass environmental stewardship grant to the tune of $125,000 to $150,000. Well, in 2008, when the market crashed, that left the budget. In 2012, we revisited, and we had been asking for it every year since, without any luck. Well, in 2012, when we had decided to come up with this BMP initiative, we utilized this initiative to help lobby to get those funds appropriated into the New York State budget. In the very first year, we approached lawmakers with the BMP initiative details, and associated that with the TESF money. Gee, we got the money, and we've had it every year since. Now, I don't know this year that we're going to get that money, just due to the fact that I think every state's budget is under tremendous stress right now due to the effects of the pandemic. But I can tell you that the BMPs helped create an awareness among lawmakers that the golf industry is being proactive about their responsibilities to the environment. On a community level, I can tell you that I was a golf course superintendent for 18 years, nearly 18 years, in the same community, Bedford, New York, which is about an hour north of New York City. And this community is full of I could name a bunch of names, Ralph Lauren and Martha Stewart, and it's full of people like that. They have these big sprawling estates with horse farms. You can't even believe it's only an hour from New York City, but they really love their trees. They love their well water. Everybody's on well water up here, and so there's a real connection to the environment up here. And I can tell you that the town of Bedford, for a golf course located in the town of Bedford, it was never easy. We were always looked at in somewhat of an adversarial relationship. And we implemented these BMPs, and I can tell you that the change in the relationship was almost immediate, and it became a more trusting relationship, much like the relationship that got developed with regulators. When I first got to the club that I was at, you would have never thought we could win an environmental award from the town. Well, once we implemented these BMPs, brought us closer with the town, we actually ended up winning an environmental award from the town, which was amazing. And Beth Evans, who was the consultant, environmental consultant for the town of Bedford, was there for over 30 years. She says that the town of Bedford's environmental consultant, as the town of Bedford's environmental consultant, I had the opportunity to observe the operation of 2 golf courses in the town. Both of those courses had applications before the Wetland Control Commission over the years for various improvements. In review of these applications, the commission required that the courses implement a water quality monitoring program. So Bob Nielsen, the other superintendent in our town, and I were required to test our water on an annual basis. And we implemented that program to screen for potential impacts to both surface and groundwater resources. Both courses also implemented numerous BMPs over the years, designed to protect the water resources and enhance wildlife habitat and open space amenity for the courses. The results of the water quality monitoring programs have demonstrated that the BMPs are effective in protecting both the surface and groundwater resources. Wow. Man, that's huge for an environmental consultant to say that. BMPs are effective in protecting both the surface and groundwater resources, while allowing the superintendents to identify potential negative impacts before they become a problem. What a great quote. And that quote wouldn't have happened without BMPs. Bob Nielsen, the fellow I mentioned just a minute ago, who is the superintendent, he's been at Bedford Golf and Tennis for over 30 years, has said this about the BMPs and his and how they've impacted his community relationships. Bedford Golf and Tennis recognizes its social responsibilities related to the environment, and our commitment to preserving and protecting water resources is well expressed through our facility's adoption of golf BMPs. The use of golf BMPs has promoted healthy turf grass and cost savings. Additionally, since adopting the golf BMPs, Bedford Golf and Tennis has further strengthened its relationship with town officials, neighbors, and the Bedford community. I can't think of one reason for a facility to oppose adoption of golf BMPs. Now listen, I've read all these quotes because I think that, and you could have read them yourselves, and that's fine. And I don't like just reading the data that's on the slide in front of you, but I think it's important for you to hear what those quotes are saying. Those quotes are saying that the BMPs have been an integral part of developing these critical relationships. And, I received a phone call last year from the head of Pollinator Pathways. Now, Pollinator Pathways is a group committed to helping create these large habitat areas for pollinators and connecting them around the state, right? Around the Northeast, frankly. And they called me because they saw our BMPs and thought they were so impressive that they wanted to join together with us. This is an environmental group who wanted to join together with us and create educational opportunities to create a learning opportunity for people to understand the importance of habitat and creating pollinator habitat, and include in that education what great work golf courses are doing by providing habitat in so many cases. Listen, I can't even imagine 10 years ago, 15 years ago, an environmental group reaching out to somebody in the golf industry about partnering to educate about environmental issues. It's really almost mind-boggling. But I think that's our future. If we take this initiative seriously enough and implement these facility BMPs, I think the future is super bright for golf. So now we're going to move to maintain, and we're going to talk about using BMPs to produce a healthier turf grass. And we're going to use a good, better, best example. Now, because of the fact that we're on a sort of somewhat limited schedule, I've simplified these good, better, best. But these good, better, best examples that we're going to look at could be super comprehensive and should be super comprehensive. But because of the fact that we're here for an hour, I want to run through a couple of examples quickly. And we're going to first look at a nutrient management example. So a good approach would be to simply lower your rate of soluble nitrogen use as the temperatures decline. So plants don't need as much nitrogen as the temperature declines, obviously. So you could adjust your rates instead of saying, I'm going at that 1/10 of a pound right up to November 1st. Well, let's look at it from a what the plant needs perspective. If it's cold out and your grass isn't growing as much, is the plant really needed? Is it utilizing all of that N? A better approach would be to, in addition to reducing the N in colder temperatures, would be to monitor your ET and your growth potential. Those then can help you quantify the need for N use. And then a best approach would be to take the good and the better and then add measuring your growth rate via clipping volumes. Now remember and keep in mind that this is a simple approach. This is not a comprehensive BMP, but it just gives you at least a sense of how to develop a BMP and what's behind it, and that you don't have to have the Cadillac BMP to have an impact. But it doesn't take much to have the Cadillac in many cases. We can measure clipping volume, very easily. So this summer, I rode my bike across the country and promoted the use of BMPs as I went along from state to state. And in each state, I stopped at a golf course and talked to them about what BMPs they're implementing. And I created these little videos. And one of the places I stopped at was the golf course there at Indianapolis, at the 500. And so they talked about measuring clipping volume. One of the questions I had was, how labor intensive is it? Is it a little daunting to measure your clipping volume? And he said, Not at all. He said, in fact, it really doesn't take any additional time at all. Once you get everybody on board and trained up, it's a pretty fluid process. So that's a real simple, easy way to measure your growth rate and help you determine, your turf's nutrient needs. So now we can also look at that same concept in managing organic matter, right? So we're going to use this good, better, best strategy. And I want you guys not just necessarily to focus in on the details of the good, better, best as we go along, because like I said, they can include a lot more than what I'm putting in here. But these are just nice little examples so that you can start to create this mindset of good, better, best, right? So managing surface, organic matter. A good approach would be to utilize a calendar-based approach to N fertilization. All right, so we know when it's colder, you're not putting down as much N. It's not the greatest way to do it, but it's an effort. It's acknowledging that the plant doesn't need as much N when it gets colder, and as well as incorporating plant growth regulator use. And then this approach would also incorporate a light frequent top dressing program, which I'm assuming most guys do, in combination with some sort of cultivation. So that's a good approach. Now, if we look at a better approach, we can casually monitor turf growth rate. Okay, so we could just, let's say we're looking in the buckets as the guys are mowing. Oh, it looks like they're not getting much grass today in the buckets. Okay, so that's kind of a casual way of monitoring your turf growth rate. And then you can also apply N based on growth potential, right? So that's applying N as a plant needs it. And then also with your plant growth regulators, you can maintain, if you can do that on a regular basis, and we're going to look at the best approach for that too, which then takes that up a notch. And then along with that, maintain your light frequent top dressing program, and then in with that would be incorporating a less invasive cultivation, but that you're doing more throughout the season, right? So we can think of incorporating needle tines throughout the season, those types of things that give you a level of of control and ability to incorporate the top dressing in and so forth, getting your nutrients down where they need to be. And then a best approach would be best organic matter management program measures clipping volume through the season. So that would be a formal measurement of clipping volume. You apply N based on growth potential, right? So demand driven. We're not applying N based on the supplier said I should put it down now. No, we're looking at the turf and recognizing when it needs it and when it doesn't need it. And then we apply growth regulators on a growing degree day formula, right? So I hope that everybody's utilizing a growing degree day formula for growth regulators. And then you must apply your top dressing at a rate that carefully matches growth, right? So that takes that top dressing program just to another level. And then finally, utilizing cultivation and maintaining surface infiltration, right? So you're getting, creating holes and channels so that your roots can get down there, you're deeper, and listen, it's why we cultivate. We all know why we cultivate. I can tell you that implementing this approach over the course of the last 10 years of my tenure at the golf course that I was at in Bedford, I did not pull cores one time on my greens. Not one time. I did it solely via solid tines, and my healing process was super quick. And listen, I aerified with 5/8 solid tines in the spring and in the fall, and then throughout the season, maybe every 3 weeks. It was really dependent on all the variables that go into making the decision. I would use quarter tines, quarter-inch tines, and create some small holes, and those holes would close up in a day. And I was able to keep my organic matter through that program at the 1.75 to 2% rate very consistently. And I know of a couple guys who are now using solid tines on their fairways. I mean, imagine aerifying your fairway without having to pull up a core, right? Be a big labor saver. Now we're going to look at improved water use strategies using the good, better, best method, right? So a good irrigation management strategy would just be to visually inspect the course as you go around, but then also to train your staff to look for clues as they're going around mowing greens, mowing tees, mowing fairways, right? These guys should be trained, your guys should be trained to not only identify clues, maybe a head isn't turning on and there's a brown patch, and maybe it's in an area that you haven't been for a week. Hopefully not, but maybe it's a weeping head in an area that, as you're driving around the course, you rarely get to, and so they need to not only recognize that, but then they also need to be trained to communicate that back to you. Just because they're trained to see it doesn't mean they're trained to communicate it. So that's an important part of the process. A better approach would be to include what we just talked about and then add regular visual audits of running heads. So when I put up a head to water in a chemical or to cool down the turf or to put some water out during the day, every head that ever went up had to be visually inspected by the person that put the head up to make sure it was rotating properly and to make sure it looked like the nozzle was performing properly. Not that you can tell exactly whether or not the nozzle's performing properly, but you can certainly see if there's any sort of catastrophic issues with a nozzle or a head when it's running. And then on top of that, if we want to get to the best approach, you would conduct regular system audits using catch cans. So I use catch cans, and I can tell you that I very often found deficiency in my system, and I would use that data to program my system run times, and I would move those run times around based on what I found out in the field, and hopefully you guys are doing the same. Now we're going to move into sustain and how BMPs can lead to improved water quality and resource protection, healthy turf, and cost savings. Right, so reduce water use. BMPs help you reduce water use through, well, one of the ways is just what we spoke about there, irrigation auditing. If you implement an irrigation auditing BMP at your facility, you will save water. You can also save water by creating a healthier turf. If you're managing your turf, utilizing the science in these BMPs, you're going to have a healthier turf stand. A healthier turf stand requires less water. Another aspect of the BMPs that relates to reduced water use would be to select turf grass varieties that are drought tolerant. So anytime you're changing out turf grass on your golf course, keep in mind that the selection that you're making and its impact on water use, right? If you can use some of the new, more drought tolerant species of turf grass on your course, whether it's in sod projects or large renovation projects, that should be a tremendous consideration for you as you go through those processes, and can save a tremendous amount of water. You know, on my trip across the United States, I stopped at Muirfield Village, and they're doing a massive renovation, as most of you guys know. And one of the elements of their renovation that they've taken on is to swap out some turf. So they're now converting all of their fairways to bent grass. Why are they doing that? Because they recognize that they're going to be able to use less water and less pesticides. that decision was made primarily because of its positive effect on the environment. You know, they're a big part of that community there, and they're considered leaders of that community. And so making that decision, whereas not inexpensive, and they didn't share the cost with me on that, but we know that that's not inexpensive, is going to have a tremendous impact on their relationship with the community. You know, they're also through that renovation project have allowed their rough grass to go unirrigated throughout the entire summer. So they only had turf grass that was drought tolerant remaining by the end of the year, and then they were going to overseed that with other drought tolerant turf types. So that's a pretty massive BMP that not everybody would have the ability to implement, but what an amazing BMP example of a BMP there that is going to produce reduced water use. Reduce nutrient and pesticide use. So that example that I just gave is a great example, again, of the reduced nutrient and pesticide use, that conversion of turf grass that's more drought tolerant and would require less pesticide use and nutrient use. We've got minimum level sustainable nutrient programs out there, models that we can use, which allows us the luxury of feeding the soil to what the grass needs versus beyond what the grass needs, right? So we're using less fertilizer in that instance. GPS sprayers, not everybody has the financial resources to be able to purchase a GPS sprayer. Maybe you could look at it from a different perspective. Think about the finances you could save through reduced pesticide use. You know, there's less overlap. There's less error. You know, throughout my career, and I'm sure anybody who's been in the industry long enough has seen a straight line of dollar spot in their fairways as a result of operator error. And we know that, you know, nature doesn't produce too many straight lines. It's pretty easy to see when a guy, when a person, you know, doesn't apply the chemical properly, and those GPS sprayers virtually eliminate that problem. Using EIQ, so determining your impact on the environment based on the chemicals that you're using is a very important part of aligning yourself with a BMP mindset. IPM, right? A big part of IPM is keeping records, appropriate records, and basing decisions on historical data and current conditions. And we know that BMPs can contribute to reduce labor costs, right? So if you're reducing your pesticide and fertilizer applications, then you're saving money. I mean, that's pretty easy math there. You can also reduce your mowing frequency. One of my stops along the way was in Nebraska at the Prairie Club, and the director of golf there is using a unique mowing system there, which allows him, in combination with using reduced fertilizer inputs and in combination with growth regulators, allows him to reduce his turf's water requirements, but it also allows him to mow his fairways twice a week. And for him, that's a big deal because he's got, between two golf courses, 180 acres of fairway. And you heard me properly there, 180 acres between two fairways. So the fact that he can mow those fairways twice a week versus 3 times a week is a tremendous cost savings for him. And you may not realize those cost savings, but over time, it will add up. And a healthier turf, as we know, would require less hand watering. So that's also a cost saving. And these are just a few examples. Again, we're almost out of time here for my talk. So I just wanted to highlight a few of these things as we go through the talk. This is by no means should be considered comprehensive. And finally, we can utilize our BMP document as a resource. We can use our state document to to find information about the latest science-based turfgrass guidelines. So hopefully your BMP over time will continue to evolve just as science does in our industry, and that it'll be continually updated as that science changes. Another way it can be utilized is through as a resource to find federal and state regulations. I cannot tell you how much time I've spent going down rabbit holes trying to find state and federal regulations. You go to their websites and it's the most clunky system you can imagine. Trying to find the most basic information can sometimes be a challenge. Well, your state document will have all of the federal and state regulations that you're looking to find, and it's easily accessible. You can also, with regard to a facility document, you can tailor this document to your facility, right? So the GCSAA has a program now that they're promoting, so that you can literally go online, you can download your state BMP document and then tailor that document to your facility. What an amazing thing, and it's not difficult to do, and depending on how elaborate you want it, you can do it yourself. You could hire a company to put together your BMP document, and then you can utilize that to strengthen your position if you're in a permitting process, or if you're trying to develop these community relationships. You can then also use the document to train your staff. So you've got these young buck assistants or interns or spray techs that are in there that are just eager to learn, and you know, they're, I'm sure, constantly asking you questions, and you know, you can refer them to this document and say, hey, you know, go read the nutrient management section of this document, and then come back to me, and then let's talk about that. So it's a wonderful document. It's a wonderful concept. I hope that you guys, through the process of this workshop, sort of develop that BMP mindset and get over the fact that this somehow is a chore or just one more thing that I have to do. If that's the way you're looking at it, we're never going to be successful here. You have to look at it and embrace it for what it is. It's a way for golf to sustain itself moving forward. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions that you might have, and tell you that I appreciate you hanging out with me for an hour. Do we have any questions?
Aren't any questions in the box, but you can also use the raise your hand feature, and we can unmute you if you want to ask your question directly to Ken.
Well, I can tell you that I do appreciate you guys sticking around and going through this with me. Again, this is really just a tool to get your juices going, get your mind in the right position, thinking about this thing not only from a micro level but from a macro level, and understanding your role, not just in your community but really in the world. You're a land manager, and with that comes responsibilities. And we have to embrace those responsibilities and do everything we can to help create a world that is sustainable for future generations. So thanks so much, guys.
We do have a couple questions here. Let me see if I can pull them up here, Ken. So how are we doing as far as disseminating all of the wonderful things that we are doing through the BMPs for members of the community outside golf? We all know the benefits, but how are we telling our story to the rest of society that still looks at golf as an environmental contaminator?
Well, so hopefully what you're doing is you're going to your state capital and participating in some kind of a lobby day that then allows you to communicate to lawmakers what the golf industry is doing. Of course, we have We have our day in Washington, D.C., golf day in Washington, D.C., where we're communicating with legislators there. So that's how we're attacking the government. Hopefully, and I can say, having worked on BMP documents for 13 states, that every single one of those states included the regulators of that state in the review process. So we're communicating that way. It's really up to people, superintendents in their community and their associations, their local associations, to start to get that word out. I think that one of the things we need to do is recognize who the face of this golf industry is. It's the golf pros. It's not the superintendents, it's not the general managers, it's not the golfers, it's the golf pros. And I think we need to do everything we can to get them aligned with this BMP initiative and train them up so that they can speak to it and they can speak to what we're doing in golf. Maybe not to the degree or to the level that that you and I can, but in a way that then can promote that to golfers, so that golfers are then armed with information. They can go out into their communities and talk about golf. When somebody has a snide remark about, oh yeah, that golf course, the pesticide dumping grounds over there, and then they can smartly rebut and say to them what we're doing. It's got to be a grassroots effort, and everybody's got to do that, be a part of that communication process. I hope that answers your question.
That's good. The next one is, about how long do you estimate it takes to develop the initial facility BMP for your course?
Well, again, it can be as simple as copying and pasting it and then putting your name on the document. And whereas we would hope that you would go to a little more depth in creating a more personalized document, that in itself would be, from my perspective, considered a formal adoption of the BMPs. That would signal that you have a recognition at that golf course of the importance of BMPs, and you've got then that document. You could take that document to your town office and say, it's got your golf course's name on top of it. You don't have to tell them that it was written by somebody else. You could say that you partnered with the university, and however you want to word it, but you could take that document, and that document could then be taken to the town and represent your commitment as a golf course to the environment. That is I think a really powerful way of doing that. Does that answer the question? Oh, and so how long does it take? It could also, if you want to go deeper and develop a more comprehensive document, if you're doing it by yourself, I would say you could easily do that over your winter schedule, devote a couple hours a week to it, and over the course of a month or two, after a couple hours a week, you should have a really pretty comprehensive document that is a good representation of your golf course's commitment to BMPs.
Okay, and one more question came in. Neonicotinoid pesticides are under the gun in many states. How can BMPs be used to defend their use and occasional necessity in turfgrass management?
Yeah, so that's exactly how these things can be used, right? So by showing that we have that we're aware that we're making management decisions based on science in a way that protects water quality. If you're aligned with these BMPs, then we can literally show that our use of these chemicals is done in a way that is safe for the environment, right? So BMPs, as I rolled through those BMPs, I told you that those were simplistic examples of BMPs. But if you dive deeper into the BMPs and we talk about neonic use, and you can utilize your your IPM program, right? So you could go in depth on your IPM program and your decision-making process for utilizing the chemical through the IPM program and BMP, using the EIQ. So these are ways that we can create a foundation of trust with regulators and lawmakers, and until we develop that foundation of trust with regulators and lawmakers, there's no way we're going to have a seat at the table when it comes to help contributing toward figuring out which chemicals should be used and not used.
Great. I don't see any more questions or hands raised, but if you still have one, you can type one in or raise your hand and we'll let you ask Ken while he's on. I don't see any others. Oh, another one just came in. They want to know about how many miles you ride your bike every week, Ken.
I guess it depends on the week. You know, in the wintertime, it's not as much as in the summertime, but I would say I probably average about 200 miles a week in the summertime. I'm averaging right around 20 miles an hour, depending on what my goals are. That would be an average. You know, I think I was averaging 400 miles a week to 500 miles a week on my trip across the country. So that was a little heavy.
Right. So in addition to all of the resources we have on the GCSA website, you know, if you go to gcsa.org and under the environment section, we also have pages on some environmental compliance topics, as well as a page on resources for managing for pollinators on your course. So that's something else to check out along with our BMP page. And I don't see any other questions coming in. So I just one more announcement that anybody who's, you know, at least partially following BMPs probably already has a good start on an application for Environmental Leaders in Gulf Awards, which are open now, which is a different application period than it has been in the past. They open February 1st and will close April 30th. So definitely get your applications in. Your points will be processed in the next few days. Please complete the survey as you exit. And thank you again to Ken Benoit for all of his help with this event.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ken.